Oh, you started.
All right.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We are Raynelle and Claudia, and this is episode 2 of our 4-part web series on energetic communication. So thanks for tuning in. And so Raynelle, would you like to introduce yourself, and then I'll introduce myself?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Claudia. I'm excited to talk about our topic, which gets a little bit deeper from last episode. I'm Raynelle. I'm a transformational coach. I have a nature-based coaching and consulting firm, and I help diverse professionals in the social sector continue to create change in the world without the emotional overwhelm and burnout. And I do a lot of this by encouraging self-care in nature. So some sessions will be out engaging in nature with an outdoor private session. I also do group healing hikes, which can have a very energetic healing component to it. And groups will also come to me as this kind of alternative team build during these hikes. So that's a lot of my coaching practice.
Thanks. And so I'm Claudia. A little bit about me. I'm born and raised in San Francisco. I'm an energy worker and curandera. I work out of Community Well in the Excelsior District of San Francisco, and I draw on Mesoamerican traditional medicine, and I work with the chakras, or the 7 energy centers of the body, of the energetic body. I do energy readings and energy clearings, and I work with young professionals of color in a collaborative way. And I help support them cultivate their inner knowing, and so they can live out a more authentic and fulfilled life. So that's mostly what I do. Yeah. So again, thank you so much for tuning into episode 2 of our energetic communication series. This week's episode is about interpersonal vibration. But first, before we jump into the content for this episode, I do want to recap last time's episode, which was all about quieting the intuition. And so I wanted to go over the main takeaways that we went over last time. So there's 3 main points. The first one is about just recognizing that something is happening within yourself. There's messages that we receive all the time about quieting our own intuition, right? So just recognizing that it's happening, and when it happens, and how it happens, and how we talk to ourselves. And then the second point is, how do we start listening to that little voice that's coming up inside of us? So instead of quieting it, that voice, asking it to come forward, asking the intuition to really speak to us, and how we start listening. And then the third is putting that into practice, like really cultivating and getting into the practice of listening to that little voice or the intuition inside of ourselves. Mm-hmm. So it's all about working with ourselves from within. And then this time we're moving from communication from within to now communication with another, so outside of ourselves. So that's why we named this episode Interpersonal Vibration. Was there anything that you wanted to add to that, Raynelle?
So last week really also was that recap around specifically quieting of the intuition, and just understanding that it doesn't always come from us that we're quieting it, that there are other pieces of our environment, society, that cause this quieting of the intuition. I think that was a great part of the discussion last week. And then really, I really appreciated last week and talking about that awakening too, and enlivening it back. It almost reminds me of, like, in the context of what we talked about last episode. Actually, right now, it just is ringing to me that that is also a component of decolonization.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
consequences of colonization is quieting of the intuition. We also talked about, okay, well, the decolonizing component is, well, how do we awaken that? So
Right.
yeah, thank you for that recap too. And that just came to me right now. So
Yeah, I mean that's amazing because part of it is like we internalize the messages that we receive from society, and of course, like we live in a colonized society, and
yes.
many of us, our families and our parents come from colonized countries as well, and then of course we live in the US, so a lot of those messages we internalize, and then we just tell ourselves like, oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
where the quieting happens.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for bringing that up. That feels really important.
Yeah.
And as we move into how we want to engage our intuition in relationships with others or interpersonally, uh, I'm just curious what comes up for you, Raynelle, and around the topic, maybe in like talking about what is that? Like, what is
Mm.
interpersonal vibration? Like, what is interpersonal communication? Like
Mhm.
when we're talking about it energetically.
Yeah. Yeah. So taking that term like interpersonal, last week it kind of is like, well, we were talking about intrapersonal. So intra is like
Yeah.
within the self. This
Mm-hmm.
week we're gonna go inter. So to me, like there's so it's just like that component that makes it even more complicated. Not
Yeah,
not only do we have to listen to like what's going on in here, now there's this other energy in front of me that I'm not may or may not be very connected to understand what their vibration is. It's like I'm learning my vibration. So what is that vibration? And how, to me, it's like there's always going to be interaction in uh you know communication, even every time those interactions happen. So what is this overall vibration of this person bringing to me, and how do I manage myself so that I can make the decision of like, well, is this safe? Is this
mm-hmm.
are they standoffish? Why are they standoffish? Like just kind of dancing. To me, interpersonal vibration also like figuring out this dance when we're in communication with another person.
Mm-hmm.
How about
Yeah,
you?
you brought up this idea before about like we hear people say all the time like, "Oh, I'm catching vibes," or like good vibes or bad vibes, or I mean, that
Yeah.
comes from a real place of like your energetic, your spiritual knowing. And I think, yeah, for me, like thinking about how many of us are very sensitive to other people's energies,
Yeah.
what kind of vibes I get when I enter a room or I meet a new person. Um, and sometimes they're really like lovely vibes and sometimes they're not. And what part of myself is either lighting up or dimming down, which is something that I know that you and I have talked about a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and really just like listening in a different way. Like I feel like there are certain things that will come up for me where when I'm open,
Mhm.
and listening to that intuition or that energy that's coming up, I'm like, oh, all of a sudden I'm like, I'm really hot, or all of a sudden like my head hurts.
Yeah.
And so really being able to pick that up, knowing that I'm interacting with this person or talking to this person, or like they're talking to me about something really heavy, as just one example. Yeah, that's what comes up for me. So
Mm-hmm. And I think
one
it.
of the
Oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I think we were also talking about in last episode too, this kind of like fight or flight instinct, coming from that intuitive, like, is this safe or not? And then now it's also like getting deeper into it, how do we even recognize those vibes in whatever circumstance we're in,
Mm-hmm.
to make the most out of that, whatever that interaction is. But that wasn't a question. That was just like a statement.
Yeah. Well, no, I think like you really bring up a really good point because it speaks to exactly like, well, why would we even want to know? Like, why is this important?
Mm-hmm.
And in our conversations, for me, at least what comes up is like, oh, it's so important because like I want to be in the know. Like when I'm interacting with somebody, like I want to know like, oh, how are you impacting me? Like, where are you at? Where are you
Yeah.
at energetically? So it just brings it's almost like having a map sometimes. Like I'm like, okay, it brings a certain amount of awareness of like, what terrain am I actually getting myself into right now? You know?
Yeah. What's this about?
Mm-hmm. And most of the time, as we've talked about, like it really, I mean, like it doesn't have anything to do with us. So, which we'll get into,
Yeah.
we will definitely get into, but yeah.
Yeah. And the whole like, why is it important too is, sometimes this will happen too when I'm working with somebody. There becomes like maybe some of their work is around, well, I just keep attracting this kind of person. I keep attracting this, or this situation keeps happening to me, It's
Yeah.
like, okay, so is there a pattern? And like naming, if we're able to name it, first we have to be aware of like, how are you coming into this? Like, how are you impacted with these said conversations or interactions with people? So it's really also another level of listening in to, okay, so what's the vibe happening? You're noticing a pattern in those vibrations. How is it impacting you? And are you aware of maybe, what your influence or their influence is on you? Sometimes this actually brings up like how sensitive they are and they didn't realize it. Sometimes this brings up like, oh, I actually have deep empathy and I'm now discovering it because now that we've put it in this framework, that's why it's so difficult for me to manage through these types of interactions or people, whatever it is. So I think
Yeah.
the importance there is to recognize, start listening more to what those inner messages are
Mm-hmm.
when in
Yeah.
communication with others.
Mm-hmm. For sure. It makes me really like, I see this kind of like across the board, as you said, with clients, but with my friends and in my personal life, I I constantly were receiving messages, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're like, okay, so a lot of times people will tell me like, oh, I had this interaction with this one person that I was dating, or like this one coworker, or and it's kind of like similar, like there's a theme, like what you were saying. So it's really important, I think, just to what you were saying, like to your point, like just to be able to recognize the first step is just knowing like, oh, something's happening. Something's happening between the two of us. Um, and being able to say, okay, like this is your energy and this is my energy, right? Like, um, and kind of like being able to decipher what is going on, or yeah, but more importantly, like just recognizing that there is like a greater message that's being sent, and that like your intuition in that interaction is kind of like driving that message forward so you can see it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think the trick is that sometimes it takes practice to learn what the
Yeah.
message is. And so like that trial and error of like, well, I don't like this pattern.
Yeah.
And what different action or response do you want to give in order for a different outcome? And so here's where we start to actually draw upon the inner wisdom that you coach on, is practicing. It's okay to not get it right. I think the most important thing is that you know something needs to change. And so I think this also reminds me that in a lot of instances when I hear a lot of that, or when I've experienced it before, where it's like, well, I'm really just done with life happening to me.
Yeah.
I want to know how it just is gonna, like, no matter, like, that person has their own thing. And I'm at a point, like, there was a time where I was at a point where I was like, I know that, I recognize that. What do I do next?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so what we do next is not let that happen to you, but allow it to move through you. Like, because that's their story, bringing it, whether it's like for you or not, you're learning from them, or they're there for you for a particular reason to learn something, that's fine. But in a lot of instances where it's just like, I feel like things are happening to me, diving into this inner wisdom also allows us to have those similar situations come up, but this time let's have it move through us. So let's not hang on to it. Only take what's gonna serve us moving
Yeah.
forward.
It really speaks to what we are saying is more of a foundation from episode 1, from quieting the intuition. When you bring that to the forefront, you're able to see, okay, this is my work, right? Like, this is my energy. Like, I know where my work is. Like, if I have a broken heart, or if I'm feeling sensitive, or if I have like a really loving heart, wherever you're at, like, it's so important to be able to just recognize where you're at, so you can enter into an interaction with somebody just knowing your baseline. And that way it's so easy to okay, let me back up. It's not easy, but it's a start to be able to recognize the other person and where they are, because that deciphering
Mm-hmm.
between the two of you
Yep.
is so crucial, um, in how you're going to hold the interaction, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's where the practice comes, though. Because the other thing is that the challenge in that is, you're like, okay, yes, I could say that I want this, but really, to know what you even want, you got to know who you are. Because the
yeah,
more you know that, you're just like, I'm sure that I want this life. I want this stuff to happen to me, which is mostly positive, happiness, all of that stuff. I want, like,
yeah,
love and all of that. But we really, that's where the work is to really know, as much as you can. Just keep learning yourself, keep practicing, because the more you know, it's like the more you know what you're holding your boundaries around. You know what you
yeah,
are protecting. The vibration is much more clear in, like, oh, do my vibrations match with you? Or are we kind of like, our wavelengths kind of like bumping each other?
yeah,
So you want a little bit more harmony. Okay, so then, you got to shift your vibration maybe. And maybe, just like, we always say this too, it's like, once you shift this, like, inner here, everything
mm-hmm.
outside shifts around you.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that it really speaks to energetically when we're having interactions and, dancing with others, conflicting with others. It's like you always have opportunities to make that choice of like, is this serving you? Is this
Yeah.
something for that to move forward?
Yeah. And I think it definitely is valuable to say explicitly, like, once you're able to decipher, then from there, or once you're able to see what's going on between the two of you, then from there, you're able to really have the choice, like what you said. Like, you're able to have agency
Mm,
instead of just being at the effect of others. You're,
exactly.
you're able to be clear, you're clear about yourself, you're clear about how it is that you're receiving this person and their energy, and you can choose how you want to engage that. I'm not saying like, you know, cut people off or whatever, or like, or just let people, all people in, but like that, when you bring the awareness, there's choice around it. Like, somebody is like really going through a hard time and their vibe is really heavy. And do I have the capacity, like knowing yourself and stuff, like, do I have the capacity to hold them right now in that way?
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. It could get
so
tricky. It could get tricky because, you know, you may know something and maybe growing and developing that inner wisdom, that personal power, that agency that you talk about. But you're coming across like friends who haven't done that work, or a close
right.
community who hasn't
Or
done that.
client. Yeah.
Clients, right? So that's the other part of like managing that you're changing and accepting that, and really that it's okay if you've grown. The other part of like adulting is being able to like let go of people in your life that really
Yeah.
are just gonna not help you move forward.
Yeah. You were sharing with me about a personal experience you had, like, as you've done this work and you've changed, like, you started to see things differently. And I was hoping that you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah,
Because I really feel like it speaks to the interpersonal vibration topic that we're talking about.
yeah, totally. I mean, this example is pretty, I don't know, I want to say like it's there's a lot of people out there who are dealing with like family drama, and this whole year I'm thinking like family is going to be a theme of lots of people. Not only just like what I've been going through this past year, last year, but my interaction, my learning about myself and the growth and implementing a lot of that development happened with a family member. And those are one of the like most difficult things to navigate, is family relations, right? So I had to make a decision. It was like i i I recognized the interaction. It was on the phone, but it was like to a point where I was like listening to this person, and I said, wow, um I recognize that. I recognize the energy. I recognize the tone. I recognize the stuff that was just like bubbling up and coming to me. And as the phone call kept going, it just was like clear pathway of just hard interaction, verbal attacking, name calling, all of that. And I was kind of like, part of me was recognizing this particularly from this person. And then part of me was like, I kind of felt like I was coming out of myself in that moment. And part of me became like another wise observer outside over here. And I was like, oh, listen to that. Listen to that. I wasn't reactive this time. I was like, I'm going to name this. I'm going to name this. At least I don't like the feeling. It's coming from somewhere not really from me per se. So, as the relentlessness came on, I was just like, I'm just like listening, like I'm actively listening. And what kicked in was like this wise observer came back in. And I was like, okay, coach, even in this difficult interaction right now, I was like, I felt my hat come on, or like my coaching hat. And I was like, so can you give me an example of when I was blah, 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 whatever they called me? And it was very like, I was just like, I was a different person. I felt like I was somebody outside of that personal relationship. I was really like just a coach being like, can I coach this person into calm and owning their accusation, owning that, like all of that. But, I really stood there. It took a lot of energy. I was just like, memories started to come up of like this kind of interaction happening all throughout my upbringing and my childhood. So I just sat there, and it just like, I stayed in that different person that I am now. And I felt like I didn't take it personal in a way, because I just was like, interesting. Before I could even get into more of like a more civil conversation with this person, they hung up on me. So it just kind of like made me realize, I think my big learning lesson, I was like, wow, I was able to have that move through me in that moment without reacting. Because what I realized too is the years and years of that kind of behavior and communication with me, I was reacting, and the cycle kept going and going and going. So I had been treated like that up until this point where I made that decision. I was like, no, I'm actually transformational coach right now. I've done lots of work and I can do this. So that's where the ability for me to just be so open-ended, I was like, almost became my weapon at that point. I was like, this is not going to happen to me ever again. And so after that call too, I just was like, I'm not going to feel guilty. Yes, I'm going to name that as a very violent way of communicating, and I don't want that in my life. So it's hard because it's family, it's just like, oh gosh, you have so much history. There's like cultural stigma, all of this stuff going on in your mind. But I have to do what's best for me. And if my heart is racing because I feel like I need to survive, that is not a good interaction to be in. So that's what my body, my intuition was telling me, is just like, protect yourself by not really being who they think you are, but somebody else, and just flee.
Yeah. I do want to say, like, well, first, like, I just want to thank you for sharing that, because I feel like those personal, I mean, I think it's really personal to share. And those interactions with family are so, it's very vulnerable. And yeah, I don't think that, I mean, I personally wouldn't say that you were like fleeing. Like, I really feel like you were able to, like, exactly what it was that we talked about. Like, props to you, because like you were able to engage this situation, this interaction with somebody who you've been close with, who sounds like they wanted you to show up as old Raynelle. Like, they wanted you to show up in a different way. And then when we change, people start to be like, wait, what's happening? Like, why are you changing? You're supposed to do this other thing. And when we start to know ourselves and start to listen to, this isn't really working for me anymore, which is what you did, like, and quite quickly at that, like, in terms of this specific interaction, like, I know that you've been laying the foundation for the way that you walk in the world for several years, but like in this interaction, you were able to say, okay, I'm not going to become reactive. What I'm going to do is I'm going to know that this is not about me. and you became curious about this other person's experience. You're like, oh, okay, so like, what is actually going on? Like, from a really, like, you held yourself in compassion because ultimately you were like, I don't really want to do this with you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and then, you know, you're going to go through that healing process, but really you're able to hold the other person in compassion because, you know, like, you're holding a story about me that's no longer true.
Mm-hmm.
So that really is like from a really loving place. And then you're able to say, like, okay, well, now how do I want to move forward in that? Like,
Right.
you didn't get sucked in, or you didn't get reeled into the, no, you're supposed to act this way when I act this way.
Yes.
So
Yeah, exactly. That whole feeling of like pulling,
yeah.
exactly what I was experiencing. And you know, the new me was like, no,
Yeah.
don't go there.
Understandably so, because like, who wants their family member to make them feel bad?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to feel bad about myself. I like myself. I love myself. So yeah, I think you
Yeah.
have a lot to be proud of.
Yeah. The whole, like, just don't take it personal. Don't take
Yes.
that's also the big, like, tool in that moment was like, engage and don't take it personal. I was like, 4 agreements.
Yeah.
That one's going to work for me right now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really feel like that interaction speaks to like the main points that we have been talking about. So, I mean, like, just to recap, like, our main, like, the main points about like interpersonal communication is just like, one, recognizing what's theirs and what's mine.
Yeah.
Like, what is their story? And like, what am I carrying? Like, just that's number one. And then two, how do I, now that I know, like, what's their vibe, what's my vibe, um, having a clear intention around how I want to engage it, what I want to do now in this interaction. And now from there, three, like, how do I want to engage this relationship moving forward, knowing what I know now,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So, I mean, like, I thought that was such a clear, your story was such a clear example of how we can be in interpersonal interaction and like, and really learning from the vibrations that that are interacting.
Yeah. Yeah. And as best we could, it's like, people are going to come into our lives because there's something for us to learn from them. No doubt there's the things that we receive, and then things that we give to other people as we grow and transform. But these vibrations are constantly, the goal is really to like constantly change that, because within yourself, so that it's higher and higher and higher each time, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talk about in energetic work, you know, lower vibrations, higher vibrations. um, and so part of that growing into that higher stuff is all of that, like, tension of like clashing or vibing, or, you know, and learning that until it's like really feeling, you know, for the most part, we're able to uh, put intention on what we want our life to be like, what we
Yeah.
want the people in our world to be like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. And I just also wanted to add to is that in no way am I or we, I don't want to totally speak for you, so you can tell me if you disagree with me, but like, in no way are we saying like, oh, it's just easy, like 1, 2, 3, like, here you go, here's the recipe, because obviously, like, these are people that we care about, like, people, you know, friends, family members, like coworkers. So it's always going to be um, like growing pains. There will always be growing pains. There'll be challenges. It's definitely a practice, and
Mm.
it's like a muscle that you have to really work um, to become familiar with it and like how you move. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to throw that in there too.
Yeah, which why is why I appreciate like our even just our communication series or our energetic communication series, because the energetic piece of like what's going on is usually not what is taught or, you know,
Yeah.
brought out in ways like a norm of how to communicate well with others. Like to
Mm-hmm.
speak of it about it energetically, maybe even like, you know, if we were to even go deeper, what does that mean for chakras? You know?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so things like that. So I think this is a great start um, to begin some deeper conversation.
Conversations for sure. Yeah. And we will be going like deeper dive into like our next episode. So perfect time transition for the episode 3 of our 4-part series on energetic communication, which will be on communicating through trauma. So definitely stay tuned for that. As we know, communicating through trauma can be very complex and very complicated. So um, we won't be going as deep as we can go because literally that would be like a years long course. But we will be talking about it. And yeah, how about we wrap up and then you can tell folks how they can find you, what social media places are you at, and
Yeah.
all the things.
Great. So I love that we got to this, we arrived at this point, this episode. Like Claudia said, we're going into moving through trauma, communicating through trauma, which, you know, I'm like, not to say my example, it was traumatic, but that being an example. And then so next episode is actually looking at it from that energetic perspective
Yes.
of how to actually move through some of that. But again,
Yes.
please comment, keep the conversation going as we go through, as you process this information. Hit me up on Instagram. My handle is Hike It Out Coaching. You'll find all kinds of information about my work there. My website is also Rino, Rino, RinoConsultingSolutions.com. You can book a quick consultation with me there. A lot of my events, my healing hikes, both public and some where I'm, co-facilitating or any other workshops. I usually post those on my website, and then my Instagram. There's lots of fun things there as well, but you could also see what I have going on. And same for my Facebook is Reno Consulting Solutions on Facebook. Just look for me there as well.
Yes, so definitely check her out. She has lots of dope events going on in the Bay Area, and I know a lot of you love being outdoors, so I can definitely firsthand experience recommend going hiking with Raynelle. And as for me, you can find me I work out of Community Well in San Francisco. So you can find me on their website, communitywellsf.com. You can also find me on Facebook. My business page handle is at Claudia Holistic Coach. And on Instagram, my handle is at La Clandestina, which is la double underscore clandestina single underscore. And my scheduler is on there with more information about how you can book one-on-one sessions with me for chakra readings and cleansings. So love to see you. And as Raynelle said, like we want this to be an ongoing conversation. Comment, like, share, DM us. Like we want to hear more from you. We want to know like what questions you have, what comments you have. Like give us the feedback. So
What's your vibe?
Yeah.
What's your personal vibe? If you were able to watch episode 1, how have you noticed your intuition being quieted?
Yeah.
I love to hear stories. So
Yeah, we want to hear from you. So thank you so much for tuning in. We love y'all,
Thank
and we hope
you.
you tune in for episode 3. Yeah. All right.
All right, till next time.
Bye. Till next time.